Am I the a-hole for defending my daughter's name changes? My wife, 42F, and I, 46M, have a wonderful daughter, 15, whom we adore. Because it's relevant, I'll mention that until about 2 years ago, she was our son. We had a lot of, I'll be charitable and say, unlearning to do when this all happened, and it wasn't the smoothest path for our daughter, I'm ashamed to say, but we're in a better place now, and trying. Her therapist told us early on that our daughter might want to try on a few names before she found one that fit. Then our daughter proved that wrong, we thought, by settling on one, let's say, Bethany, and sticking to it. After 6 months of going by Bethany, it looked like a done deal. I just want to say here that while neither of us handled things perfectly at the start, my wife took longer to come around than I did. Bethany's birth name, in particular, had personal significance to my wife, so the whole name thing has been difficult, period. August of 2019, Bethany's about to start high school and decides she wants a completely fresh start, name included. She told us she wanted to try Ellie. Then a few months later, Liz. Credit where it's due, she was very patient with her mom and me, because this was hard. We slipped up a lot, and she'd just gently remind us. But my wife didn't handle it well. She'd get defensive or sarcastic, roll her eyes, that sort of thing. It led to a couple of arguments between her and me. Liz stuck, but then a couple of weeks ago, my wife overheard a friend of our daughter online calling her another name, let's say Maggie. She confronted her about it. Turns out she'd been trying on Maggie for a while, just with friends, and had been reluctant to tell us. I wasn't there, but apparently my wife just kind of walked away with a fine whatever type of reaction. The last couple of weeks we've been making the new name a habit, but I guess my wife's been stewing. We were all on a Zoom call with my sister and her boys. I informed her via text about the change. My younger nephew addressed my daughter as Liz. My sister corrected him, and my wife humorously said, "Oh, let him call her what he wants. She'll have a new name next season anyway." Long story short, the Zoom call ended awkwardly and early. My daughter went directly to her room, and I had a confrontation with my wife. Her perspective, our daughter can't keep changing names like this. It's already challenging for her without all the additional changes, and she's just seeking attention. My perspective, we were informed years ago this might occur. It's our daughter's decision to make, and being sarcastic and mocking her is only going to worsen things for Maggie. So now I'm lying awake, wondering if I'm the asshole. I still believe I'm right, but my wife really has been trying, except for this instance, and we've both had our crappy moments on this. Edit. This has been very reassuring and enlightening. I'm still responding to comments, but in case I fall asleep, thank you all. I'll be talking to my wife tomorrow morning, and if she and my daughter are okay with it, I'll try to post an update. Edit 2. Holy crap. There were a couple of new comments when I checked my phone this morning, and now there are like dozens more. My wife and I sat down. It's been a very good morning, and I'm going to write an update. Edit 3. Update may or may not get approved. We'll see. Before I do that, I'll duck down and try to respond to a few comments I saw that I feel very inclined to respond to for one reason or another. But I want to repeat how grateful I am for all of the insights, perspectives, and voices of support. Update. So, my wife and I sat down this morning and talked. I told her I came here looking for insight and offered to show her the post, but she didn't feel like she needed to see it. Turns out she had been contemplating it too. Surprise, surprise. It turns out my intuition about this entire matter was somewhat correct. I didn't mention this yesterday because I didn't want to without my wife's approval. But the year we had Maggie, my wife's father, we'll call him George here, passed away. He'd been ill for quite some time, and we were hoping he'd live to meet his grandchild, but unfortunately that didn't happen, and it was heart-wrenching for my wife. When Maggie came into the world, we decided to name her George, obviously not her actual birth name, in his honor. Another crucial detail to understand for context is that our daughter resembled her grandfather immensely. As my wife describes it, it felt like he was back in her life again, providing her with a great deal of solace, more than either of us grasped, I believe. That ended up being the topic my wife and I discussed this morning. I brought up all the other positive developments and how they'd been bonding, and asked why the name was such a sensitive issue. After some back and forth, she sort of blurted out, "Every time she does it, it's like my dad died again." So that cleared up a lot. We conversed for quite a while about it, and we're not near all the answers yet, but it seems that seeing our daughter transition unearthed a lot of grief, and even though she's content with most aspects of the transition, and loving some parts of it, learning a new name for Maggie felt like a knife twisting each time it happened. I'm certain there's more to it, and we discussed therapy. She's hesitant, but gradually warming up to the idea. But it's a beginning. After we finished and Maggie was awake, we went and spoke with her. My wife apologized, and we explained to Maggie some of what was happening. Maggie, bless her, tried to apologize as well, but we reassured her that she had nothing to be sorry for. It was a productive conversation, and a few suggestions from the last post came up. They hugged it out. There were tears, and it's a beginning. Anyway, that's our current status. Since I have the opportunity, I just want to address a few things that came up yesterday. For those concerned that my wife ruined the relationship with Maggie, well, she is currently getting her butt kicked at Mario Kart, so I think there's still hope. Big thanks to all the transgender excellent individuals who shared their experiences. That was a significant help, and it made my wife feel more at ease knowing Maggie's experience is not uncommon. We both understand we're not entirely finished adjusting to our daughter's new identity, but I just wanted to reassure everyone that the conversation isn't ending here. We had a good day after a rough day. There'll be more of these, I'm certain. I mentioned this in my replies yesterday, but for those who were curious, Maggie's initial name choices were based on characters in games or stories she liked, but she says the one she's chosen now is the first one that felt right, and it has a deeper significance for her. So this might be the one that lasts. But if it doesn't, well, that's okay. Thanks again, everyone. You're good people. Am I the a-hole for cutting my daughter off from her new friends? 7 months later. My beautiful daughter Maggie turned 16 last month and is trans relevant. Over the summer, we moved halfway across the country. Mixed experience for Maggie. Obviously, it was challenging for all the usual reasons, but she was excited to start fresh. For context, she passes very well. She generally looks young for her age. So, leading up to September, she told us that she didn't want to be out at her new school. She wanted people to just know her as a girl, not not as a trans girl. I admit, my wife and I weren't sure what to make of this, but she seemed happy. She quickly made friends with several other girls her age, especially one girl Brittany, important soon. Things were going smoothly, and we relaxed a bit. Then Friday, I received a text from Maggie's best friend back home, we'll call her Jenna, asking either me or my wife to call her and not to inform Maggie yet. Basically, Maggie has been hanging out with both Jenna and Brittany online, and Brittany would occasionally say very transphobic things, along the lines of trans women not being real women, or they're disgusting, you understand, and Maggie would laugh along and agree. Apparently, Jenna privately confronted her, and Maggie begged her not to say anything or out her, saying Brittany was an amazing friend otherwise, and so on. Jenna, bless her heart, didn't want to be cut off from Maggie, so she agreed. So last week they were hanging out, and Brittany made a comment about some pervert at school, and Maggie tried to change the subject, but it all came out anyway. There's another trans girl at the school, and Brittany has been bullying her, in front of with friends, including Maggie, and Maggie has done nothing to help this poor girl, or distance herself from Brittany. This led to a massive fight between Jenna and Maggie, and they haven't spoken since. Now Jenna figures if she can't salvage her friendship with Maggie, she can at least maybe help her by telling us. I exploded. I don't have room for details, but I tore a strip off Maggie for being a part of this, confiscated her phone, grounded her, and told her never to speak to Brittany or that group again. This ruined her weekend plans. It's been 2 days, and she hasn't spoken to me since. My wife has been on my team in front of Maggie and is horrified by what's been going on, but she thinks that we can't expect to forbid teenagers from seeing one another, and I've now cut Maggie off from some of the only friends she has out here, but I just don't understand it. I've tried talking to her, but she just won't, and I don't want to push her too hard. Her mother persuaded her to reschedule her next session with her therapist, though reluctantly, but otherwise, she hasn't had much success either, and she believes we made an error. So, here I am. I feel terrible about how I reacted, but I also don't see what else I could have done. My daughter is supporting a transphobic bully, and I can't understand how she can live with that. Every time I think about it, I just see red. Am I the a-hole? Edit. Reading everything here has been helpful. I appreciate all of you. My wife has just seen the post to read for herself as well. We will be sitting down and talking with Maggie today, and I will apologize for how I reacted, and we'll go from there. I'm terrified about what I might hear, but if I can help it, I can't let her go back to school with everything unresolved. Edit 2. A few folks may have missed this in my post. Yes, she does have a therapist she sees regularly. That was one of the first things we arranged when she came out to us. As mentioned above, we're getting her an urgent appointment to help her handle this. Edit 3. Update. I sat down with her and apologized for losing my temper. I told her I wasn't mad anymore, just scared for her, and that I wanted to help. I said we'd need to solve this, but we'd do it together, and that my wife and I would give her some time to think about it if she needed it. And then she just broke down. She was sobbing and couldn't even get words out. Her mom and I held her and let her cry it out. After that, I asked if she was ready to talk about it, and she said she wanted a little space first to gather herself together, but she acknowledged how messy the situation is and that it needs fixing. So that's where we are now. We're letting her collect herself and calm down, and I'm typing this while her mother prepares a late lunch for her, and after she's eaten, we'll discuss it and go from there. Not sure if I'll be able to update, but I'll try. Thank you again everyone for your assistance and insight. Update. Hi folks. I'm updating here because I think this update will likely end up being too lengthy to add to my original post, and I know I don't meet the update criteria, but I thought I'd fill in those of you who were concerned. I do have Maggie's permission to share. So after Maggie had her cool down and lunch, her mom and I sat down and hashed everything out. Before going any further, I'm going to do what a few other commenters on the post did and give a shout out to Jenna for what she already did. Yes, but there's more. Maggie evidently put 2 and 2 together, figured out Jenna was the one who informed us about what was going on, and sent her an irate message on her laptop, which we'd let her keep for homework. She showed us the message. I'm not going to quote it here, but suffice it to say it was pretty long and ugly. Sent the same night I'd gone off on her. Probably would have been a friendship ender to anyone else. Not Jenna. Bless her. 3 paragraphs of awful. And Jenna's response was, "Are you okay? Do you need to talk?" Which they did, yesterday. I think Maggie gave her the silent treatment until then. She didn't say. They got on a call, they talked, they cried, and they're good now, pending how all this turns out, and I mean, who can blame Jenna for that? But Maggie did say, with lots of difficulty, that she was feeling trapped in a no-win situation and had been so scared of us finding out about this Brittany thing because she didn't think we'd understand, and we'd probably hit the roof. Oops. I think she had it in her head that she could get through to Brittany and work it all out. Fix her, you know. So when we did find out, the whole thing came crashing down. Most of the folks who commented on my post were right on the money, and I'm ashamed I didn't see it, or maybe take the time to think about it, before I got so angry the other day. She and Brittany were well into their friendship, and Maggie was very much part of the group before any of this arose, and once it did, Maggie was so terrified of what would happen if she were outed that she felt all she could do was go along. But of course, there's more. It turns out the other trans girl, the victim, she needs a name, so let's call her Emily, is a new kid, in addition to everything else, and from the sound of it, a remarkable new kid. She transferred to Maggie's school toward the beginning of December, around the time Jenna started noticing the inappropriate comments, and apparently, Emily is out and proud. Like trans flag buttons on her shirt, proud. But there's more. Buckle up. I mentioned in one, or 2 comments that I spent part of the weekend getting in touch with Brittany's parents, and they were a collective piece of work. What I discovered was that they have been repeatedly complaining to the school about Emily, playing the role of concerned parents for all the usual ridiculous reasons, pardon my French. Props to the school here because it sounds like Brittany's folks were politely told to go make sweet love to a tree stump, I might be paraphrasing, and that Emily has as much right to her identity as anyone else. So, of course, enter Brittany and anyone who will listen to her. The way Maggie tells it at first, it was just Brittany making the occasional comment here and there about her parents or Emily or whatever. We did pause here and stress how much we wished Maggie could have talked to us then, and she agreed that it might not have gotten this bad, but she, you know, thought she could fix it. then we went on winter break. Then COVID shut down the school for a week, and classes were online. So it wasn't until just last week that things got particularly ugly. I was relieved to hear that there were only 2 incidents Maggie witnessed. One was a throwaway comment, as Brittany et al. Passed Emily in a hallway. The other incident, the one that sparked this entire situation, occurred a day or 2 after that, beginning in a similar manner, in passing outside the building, and Emily paused this time to confront Brittany. They got into a heated exchange, words were said, and Maggie just froze. Apparently, Emily called them all transphobic bean-eyes, which deeply affected Maggie. She also mentioned that she hadn't intended to be completely stealth initially, more that she wouldn't bring it up, and if asked, she wouldn't lie. But, again, comments, chef's kiss. She got swept up in the thrill of being perceived as a cis girl, and then all this unfolded before the topic arose. Christ, this is a lot. Sorry. All of this essentially leads us to this weekend, where things went wrong. I believe my outburst put things into perspective for her. She knew I would be angry but not this furious. But as I said, she was terrified of losing Brittany, afraid of being outed, and thought she could resolve it. So then we discovered what happened today, and Maggie had to take a moment to cry again, because she was so afraid to show us. I think I triggered something. When I spoke to Brittany's parents, again, oops, because Brittany is on there, sympathizing with Maggie, and criticizing Emily, blaming her for Maggie not being able to hang out with them this weekend, and what the fuck, these messages are awful. Maggie has apparently been glued to Jenna all day via her laptop, trying to cope with all the nastiness, and Maggie says nothing from before was ever this bad. My wife asked her what she wanted to do now, to which Mags channeled her inner pumpkin spice and said she can't even with Brittany right now. I clarified that this meant she knows the friendship is over, but she has no idea how to end it. She doesn't want to come out to her naturally, but she feels like she's going to face endless questions. Since there's no school tomorrow, we're going to sit down with her and brainstorm. I asked her what she would do about Emily, because I still think that because she was involved in this, she has some level of responsibility to help make things right. I was thinking an apology, which she agreed to, but then Maggie shows me screenshots of all the messages Brittany sent about Emily that morning, along with some of the ones from before the drama, which she'd been furiously finding and saving while she ate her lunch, and she says she wants to take them to the VP at the school, and I'm like fucking A. So that's where we are now. I'm proud as hell of Maggie, and also scared as hell of what she's going to have to deal with when all the shit hits the fan. I don't know what the school can do with Maggie's screenshots. I guess we'll have to see. Wifey and I are going to sit in on a call to Jenna tonight with Maggie, because we both agreed with what several of you said. She deserves credit for being absolutely top-notch here, and Maggie's therapist had a cancellation tomorrow. Praise Jeebus. So there's that too. I want to thank everyone again for everything. There will be more that happens. This ain't done, but for now, I'm done updating. I'm gonna go cuddle with my daughter and watch a terrible movie. Edit. Jesus Murphy. This all got far more attention than any of us were prepared for, Maggie included, but the outpouring of support has been phenomenal. I have decided I'm not, for the most part, going to try to respond to the massive orchard of comments here, but I do want all of you to know I'm reading every single one, sharing the advice and perspectives with Maggie and her mom, and feeling downright humbled. When I have more time, I'll come back and try to address some recurring themes in the comments, but for now, thank you all, love you all. Another update to trans kid bullying. Am I the a-hole? By 5 months later. So I forgot about this account again, and then randomly remembered it today. I have no idea how many people will see this, but in case some of those who saw my last one happen to stumble across it, I figured I might as well let you know how things turned out. I'll try to keep it shorter, not a lot of melodrama, and I have Maggie's permission to share. Actually, she was the one who reminded me of it this morning. Kind of a, hey dad, whatever happened to type of thing. The most important news is that things are okay. Not perfect, but okay. There were great points brought up by those who left comments on the last post, and rest assured they helped us figure things out. I'm doing this in bullet points for my own sake, so bear with me. The Reddit post. Some folks pointed out that there was enough detail in my post, and it was getting enough attention that it could be tracked down by someone at the school, and after the first comment along those lines, I swore at myself, and then sat Maggie and her mother down about it. Long story short, Maggie told me to leave it up, because 1, taking it down at that stage probably wouldn't make a difference. 2, the overwhelming support was helping her and her mother and me get through it, and 3, she pretty much said, if people find out, they find out. As far as we know, it didn't happen. Not ruling it out, but if someone at the school saw, it never got back to Maggie. Therapy. Maggie's therapist has been wonderful. When this all hit the fan, we had her on once-a-week appointments for a while, but we've been able to ease back and Maggie's in a better spot. Maggie being stealth. I won't say she decided to come out, as it were, but she realized she'd drifted pretty far from her original outlook when she went to this school, which was, I won't advertise it, but if people find out, it's no big deal. We, and her therapist, did a lot of unpacking about that, and thank goodness for her therapist, because I have felt so out of my depth here. But in short, she's come back around to that since she distanced herself from Brittany and that group. Brittany. There were a few comments pointing out that Maggie didn't owe Brittany anything, and that block delete would be totally okay in a scenario like this. Good advice. Maggie chose not to do it that way, partly, I think, because she felt guilty for not speaking up sooner about the horrible stuff Brittany said, and partly because she wanted Brittany to know exactly why they couldn't have a friendship anymore. More proof, if any was needed, that she's a lot more courageous than I am. I don't think it needs to be said that Brittany didn't take it well, but Maggie did come away from it with one consolation prize. Another girl in the group who had been similarly secretly uncomfortable with Brittany. We can call her, I don't know, Ava. I wasn't thrilled about it at first, but when Brittany and the remaining girls in that group were slinging mud afterward, it meant neither of them had to deal with it alone. Thankfully, it stopped before things got too dramatic. Emily. There was a lot of hopeful fiction in the comments on the last post about Maggie and Emily becoming a tag team trans girl duo and fighting evil, and I'm sorry to disappoint those of you who got your hopes up, but while Emily did accept Maggie's apology, they float in different circles, and Emily, quite fairly I think, isn't really looking for a friendship with with my daughter. However, about the screenshots. After a bit of thought, Maggie decided to take the advice of several commenters and talk to Emily before going to the VP. Emily, for her own reasons, decided she didn't want that, didn't even want a copy. Maggie's keeping them safe in case they're needed down the road. Jenna, still a superhero. She took some time and space after things settled down and ensured Maggie had the support she needed. Maggie had a tough period with that, but her therapist, again, amazing person, helped her comprehend why Jenna might have needed it. It didn't last long and now they're back to talking almost every day. So that's where things stand now. Haven't heard anything about Brittany in a couple of months, so I'm cautiously optimistic that the whole situation is behind us, but time will tell, I guess. To those who said this is a creative writing exercise, that's fine. I'm not concerned about whether the whole internet believes it's real. Otherwise, I just hope other parents of trans kids can get something positive out of all this. That's all I've got. Much love from all three of us, and big thanks to everyone for helping us through things. Am I the a-hole for letting my daughter call her aunt the wrong name? Nearly a year later. Hi, am I the a-hole? I'm posting at the request of my daughter, Maggie. Originally we went to Am I the a-hole, but apparently we're too frequent posters for that sub, and it was removed. Got some responses that were very validating, but I honestly wouldn't mind having a broader selection. Context. She recently turned 17, and she is trans. Since this post involves her birth name, we're going to say it's George. When she came out, my wife's family was wonderfully supportive despite knowing very little about gender journeys. My own family was tolerant. Not ideal, but not overly bad, just trying hard to be comfortable. My sister, her aunt, let's call her Bessie, was the biggest hurdle. She and Maggie were very, very close before her transition, probably because Bessie is single and without kids. She took the change weirdly personally, and we've been low contact since. Maggie took this hard. She really missed her Aunt Bess, but over time came to accept and mourn the loss. Therapy helped. So this brings us to her birthday. My mother's health isn't what it once was, and Maggie is her only grandchild, so she wanted to have a family birthday dinner for her with all of us. Grand. We checked with Maggie, no pressure obviously, and she agreed. The day arrives, we go to my mom's. My wife couldn't make it due to a work emergency, so it was just me and Mags. We weren't 10 seconds in the door when we heard Bess go, "Is that my Georgie?" from the other room. I almost turned and walked out right then, but Maggie stopped me and told me to let her handle it. I didn't like it, but I said okay. So, when Bessie comes around the corner, Maggie gives her a big hug and goes, "It's so good to see you, Uncle Brian." My sister had a face like a cat's ass, and I was trying really hard not to laugh, but my dad, bless him, was like, "Well, you walked into that one, Bess." And she walked it back with a half-assed apology and excuses. Dinner went awkwardly, although I loved every damn second of it. Bess mostly used the right name, but whenever she didn't, Maggie would politely call her Uncle Brian again. In the next few days, I heard from both my mother and Bess in the form of voicemails, saying Maggie was rude and took the whole thing too far to intentionally embarrass her aunt. My wife thought it was well-deserved, but thinks that maybe two wrongs don't make a right, and we should have just left. It came up again yesterday, so Maggie said we should ask here. Were we assholes at dinner? Edit. Okay, this post omitted some details because of the Am I the a-hole character limit, and there have been recurring questions, so I'm going to address some here. 1. Maggie's transition began 4 years ago, which is when she stopped going by George. Bessie has had a very long time to practice and adjust. She doesn't want to. 2. We went low contact about half a year after Maggie came out to us. She and Aunt Bess had spent the day together, and Bess all but refused to use the right name or pronouns, and Maggie came home a mess. Would have been no contact for a while, but Maggie didn't want that. And for those who might have looked at my post history, in fairness, the name hasn't always been Maggie. There were a good 2 years of trying different names before she settled on that one, but Bess has never used any name but George, or Georgie, and that's the issue. Bessie is, oddly enough, not fundamentally transphobic, just very, very attached to the past. Still transphobia, I know, but just for context. She is stubbornly holding on to the hope that Maggie will outgrow this phase. I hate that word. It isn't just Maggie. This is an issue in every part of her life. She's a deeply unhappy and lonely person who oscillates between complaints about the life she has and overwhelming nostalgia for the past. My relationship with her was complicated before Maggie was born, although she absolutely adored Maggie pre-transition and spoiled the heck out of her. I wish she'd spent these 4 years learning to love her niece as much as she loved her nephew. About Mom, her behavior this time was transphobic, but that is unusual for her. She was the first to figure things out when Maggie initially came out to the family, and she got my dad on board with names and pronouns pretty quickly for a woman who had no prior experience. Her actions here are more about my sister than anything else. As I said, Mom's health is failing, and she's terrified that after she and Dad are gone, Bess won't have any family left. She knows. Bess was wrong. Heck, I think she even knows she herself was wrong, but she's facing her own mortality, petrified for her daughter, and choosing a deeply misguided way to handle things. It's complicated. Am I the a-hole for letting my daughter call her aunt the wrong name? Over a year later. Hey folks, Maggie and I were reminiscing yesterday, and we remembered this account, and she thought it would be nice to give an update on things. I know it's been a while, and it was a fairly short post, but there's been a lot going on. Some good, some really shitty. Maggie encouraged me to do this, so blame her. Let's begin with the shitty stuff. My mother passed away late last year. We were expecting it, but unsurprisingly, that knowledge didn't offer much comfort. I don't want to delve into the details because this update isn't really about that, but it's relevant. I will say that nothing truly prepares you to lose a parent, and my wife is a superhero because without her and Maggie, I probably would have just crawled into a hole and never come back out. Right after my mom's passing, Aunt Bess had a mild heart attack. She's doing fine now, although recovery was tough, and I had to get more involved than I initially wanted to because I couldn't let Dad handle it all alone. My wife helped out too. Again, superhero. And then Maggie is, Jesus H. Christ, 18 now and graduating high school. That's another thing nothing prepares you for. All that context is to make this point. Bessie finally realized that Maggie is Maggie for good, and she's actually started to make an effort. I think the combination of Mom's death, her own health scare, and the fact that Maggie will be going off to university in another city next year made it clear to her that if she didn't fix things things now, she might never get the chance. I don't know. It's not perfect. And frankly, Bessie has become even more unbearable in some ways. But around Maggie's birthday, she sat down with her and gave her an honest-to-God apology. I got the details secondhand from Maggie because I wasn't there, but my favorite part of the whole thing is a direct quote from Bess that Maggie shared with me word for word. You know, I wanted a niece more than a nephew anyway when you were little, so maybe this trans thing was all my fault from the start. So yeah, the world still revolves around Bessie in her mind, but she hasn't used Maggie's dead name once around us since then, and only slipped on pronouns a couple of times, so I'm beginning to think this is a positive development. And of course, Maggie is ecstatic to have her Aunt Bess back, especially after losing her grandmother. So things are sad but pleasant. It's strange. Anyway, that's pretty much it. Maggie says I should tell you that you people are cool, so there you go. Seal of approval.